Welcome to Tavern Talks. Get around, travelers. Welcome to Tavern Talks, the video podcast where game masters, TTRPG creators from around the world share their secrets, stories, and expertise in crafting the perfect tabletop role-playing game sessions. So in this cozy virtual tavern, we'll be sitting down with expert GMs and also TTRPG creators, of course, to swap tales, trade tips, and dive into the art of creating the unforgettable TTRPG experiences and from world building to NPC crafting, session prep to improvisation, and we're gonna cover it all. So grab a pint of your favorite virtual ale, pull up a chair, and join the virtual conversation. In this episode, we'll be chatting with Tarons and his journey as 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 one of my favorite TTRPG content creators. And also, we're gonna focus on his, of course, Vagabond and his other supplements. And who is Taron? This is my first question. Who are you? Why you're here today?
What an intro, man. Hey, yeah, so I am Taron Pounds or Indestructoboy on YouTube, founder of Land of the Blind, where I'm focused on releasing a lot of stuff in the kind of system neutral sphere, but also I make my own system, Vagabond. Vagabond's kind of a blend of a bunch of the kind of contemporary ideas going on with modern TTRPGs, but also trying to reel in a lot of the practical mindset happening with the OSR and like more of the Tom Moldvay style of like D&D basic expert. Also looking into writing stuff for I've got a couple different things kind of coming up, but trying to write some stuff for Nimble, Zweihander, Merkborg, Shadow Dark. Just I try not to stay really like stuck to one system, and I try to encourage people like there's other stories you can tell with these other systems that have other mechanics, that things you might find that if you don't want to play just a fantasy superhero, there's all kinds of other stuff out there. But yeah, and I'm on YouTube and Twitch at Indestructoboy, and I try to do live streams where I guess you've been checking some of those out. Where I just kind of talk through the creative process and making anything for a TTRPG supplement, because like I feel like it is a really interesting niche of creative writing that I think even some people that I find that are like doctors in creative writing or whatever can come to like TTRPGs and still kind of feel a little bit lost, like they don't really know really what's going on with it quite. But yeah, so thanks for having me.
That's really nice. So I would like to ask, as first, of course, what sparked your interest in? Of course, it's the first question I ever come up on my mind. So, what sparked your interest in TTRPGs? Reason why?
Yeah, like I've always been a big fan. I grew up on a bunch of like JRPGs, CRPGs. I guess that's what we're calling Skyrim and Dark Souls now, with CRPG. But I grew up on a lot of those. Really love the idea of like character building, and then you can replay the game as many times and get different results. I think the first RPG I was ever really exposed to as a kid was Pokemon, and so I was just used to like that kind of a battle system. Eventually, I feel like I grew up and went over into like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and fell in love with like that that element of like playing a game and feeling like the story was coming out through whatever was happening. And I also found myself trying to get that same vibe out of other games. Like I'll play like Civilization and find myself just like incidentally like role playing out what's happening in this, whatever. Actually getting angry at NPC whatever for screwing over my country. And that just was a thing that was kind of like naturally a way that I was playing games. And then whenever I got into my like mid to late 20s, I had heard about Dungeons and Dragons over the years. I had never really gotten into it. I think at the time, the thing that I was introduced with 3.5, and I think with 3.5, there was so much info kind of thrown at me at once that I kind of felt like I don't know what's going on. I have a spreadsheet for a character, and this is not. Ooh, I'd rather go play video games. Um,
Mhm.
Eventually, I was like a really big fan of Community, and once I heard Dan Harmon was doing Harmon Quest, it was like, oh, okay, what's this thing? Find out that they're playing what they were calling D&D. They were actually playing Pathfinder. Um, but found out about that, and it was like, okay, I'll look into this thing because this looks actually like a lot of fun and not like I don't know what I had originally envisioned it to be. Uh, a bunch of nerds sitting around in their basement playing this game that like ostracized them from the rest of the world or something.
Yeah.
Now I was half right there, but like, it's a yeah, it's a I saw it more as a communal improvisation and like there was a game with integrity here. It wasn't like, oh, just we make shit up and then or stuff up. I don't know if we cuss on here on but so we just kind of make up the rules as we go, yada yada yada. Once I found out about the structure, I got a lot more interested. And by that time, D&D 5e had just come out. And I was like, all right, we're gonna get a group together. I'm gonna buy the core rule books. I'm gonna buy some dice. We're just gonna give it a shot.
Yeah.
And, from there, that led into, "Oh, this is what the game can be. This is really cool." So,
Yes.
that's whenever I started looking at, like, "Oh, you don't have to run the official adventures. You can write your own stuff. You don't have to play with the official classes. You can write your own stuff."
Mhm. Homebrew
That
kicks in. Okay.
yeah, that's where I found out about Benjamin Huffman, who wrote the Pugilist class over on the DMs Guild. And from that, I was just like, "This is really sick. Why is nobody on YouTube ever talking about stuff like this?"
Yeah.
So, I started my YouTube channel where I was, like, trying to highlight the stuff that I had found that I thought was super cool. I started actually publishing myself on the DMs Guild in
Mm.
2018, I
Mhm.
wanna say. Got on to a bunch of different projects, learned from a bunch of different people, eventually met guys like Ross Leiser and Heavy Arms. Ross is now working for the Cosmere RPG. Heavy Arms is just kind of doing his own thing. But these were guys who helped to like shape my thoughts on like D&D 5e design
Mhm.
and kind of refined me into like I guess kind of what I am today. And from there, it was like with all the OGL mess that had gone on, I had broken off after like thinking, hey, I can make my own shop and like work
Mhm.
with the OGL. And this is going to be the thing that like I can keep 100% of my revenue, not 50%.
Makes sense.
Um, you would think. And then, OGL stuff rolls out. And at that point, it was like I went from like being able to do everything full time. Like I was a teacher before I did all this.
Uh-huh.
And I left my job teaching because this was making me so much more money. Like,
Mm.
so once the OGL happened and my revenue just suddenly like plummets, I was like, well, okay, so I don't like the thought of everything I make can be beholden to the whims of this company that can just literally say next week, hey, you owe us 20% of everything you make now. Um, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go make my own thing. Um, so that's where Vagabond kinda came out. I of course, up to that time, there were other games I had kinda checked out.
Mm.
I really loved Merkborg, and that was the first one that I think really broke my, like, 5e zealotry, you know? Merkborg was the game that came along and kicked down the door and was like, "No, no, 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 see, dying is fun." And,
Definitely, like, and it's expansions or unofficial expansions as well, like Corpork or any kind. Corpork was like that to go to actually. Mhm.
it's a super easily hackable system. The guys that make it, Stockholm Cartel, are just super cool. I even think like if I were to run a game of Merkborg, I would actually probably try to run like probably Frontier Scum, which is it's a Borg hack, but it's Western, and I just think I don't know. There's something funny to me about rootin' tootin' cowboys robbing trains and stuff. That just yeah. Uh,
Rich.
so but yeah, over the last 2 years, I've been writing Vagabonds. It's now it's published, it's out there. We're doing some like light playtest polishing to make sure the system is like locked in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Waiting on final artwork, and then we're looking at hitting print next year, probably quarter 2. So, yeah, it's been a trip. Um, you see the live stream, so it's mostly me
Of course.
streaming the process, talking my ideas out, and yeah, that's me.
So, okay, so I understand that you are one of the people that are out there trying to create your own unique sense of playing the TTRPGs. So, but what do you do on a daily basis? Like, how do you balance your love for TTRPGs or your creations with other aspects of your life? That actually is a huge question, Chris.
Yeah, I think it kind of jumps off with an assumption there that any part of my life is balanced, which it's not.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so like work-life balance is definitely a tricky thing to handle there. Mostly from the time that I wake up until the time that I'm going to sleep, I am polishing something. I'm on 5 different layout projects right now.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is helping me to afford to put that back into the stuff that I'm making. Um, for me originally, this is not a path that like everybody can take. This is always something I try to tell newer creators that are in the TTRPGs. I would never jump into it thinking that you would have the kind of success that some other things already kind of have. Even indie projects like Shadow Dark. Um, Pretty much everybody recognizes Shadow Dark as an anomaly because Kelsey was working on that for many years and got it kind of like discussed in the old school scene. Um, so like word had already kind of gone out about that. So that's $1 million on your first project like that is absolutely insane.
Oh, it
Um,
definitely is.
it should not be the expectation. Um, and so in all that being said, to indie creators that are looking at kind of what I could make happen with a TTRPG, I think the strongest thing that you can do, number one, is understanding production.
Oh, yeah.
And by that I mean what roles do you know that you're going to need to take on? I am my own layout guy. I am my own marketer. I am my own art director. I am my own like financial guy, logistics I'm trying to handle.
Up there, huh?
It's a lot that I don't think a lot of people who were like, I want to make a TTRPG, if they just jump in and they're like, I'm gonna make a Google Doc and like we're gonna play this game and like that I love it. Keep creating, keep creating. But if you jump into it with the end goal of being things like, I'm gonna get a book made, and this book is gonna have all this incredible, crazy art. I got to get it out there to around the world, and then hopefully, like this person, or person will pick it up. It is a gargantuan task.
Oh, yeah.
Um, that's a lot.
A lot.
Uh, so yeah, and I mean, there's also all the other discussions going on around like ethical use of AI, around all this other stuff that it's a minefield to navigate right now. But yeah, knowing I think whenever you're getting in on a project and you want to like kind of set out to like I want to make a game,
Mm-hmm.
look at what your options are for getting it released. Not everything has to be like a big like
Hey, Philippines.
yeah, it doesn't have to be this big 8.5 by 11 print. Um,
Mm-hmm.
some of my favorite stuff is actually, you know,
Yeah.
5.5 by 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
Like this format is not only do I think that it's more handy and practical, it's cheaper. You know,
Like, yeah, definitely.
like you're
It's it looks nice.
yeah, you're what you're talking about in terms of overhead, like what I guess to the audience members, overhead is like what you have to pay to get a thing made.
Mhm.
So like per book, if I'm looking at a D&D book like this is probably like $9 to $10 per book. That's
Mm.
when the MSRP is like $50. But
Oh, yeah.
for like Merkboard, we're talking about probably $4 to $5 per book.
Yeah, for 450, yeah, that should be there.
Yeah. And so look at your options for production. That's the leading into it with a game plan and knowing the steps from like, here's the idea to here's the book in my hands. Well, not just in your hands, in your customers' hands. That's the big,
Mhm.
big push.
Yeah.
It's it's easy for you to get something that you made. It's not easy for the rest of the world to be able to get something you made. That's where
Mhm.
logistics steps in. But yeah,
That's only part of the creative thing. So,
it's yeah, it's just if you want to do the things that like Chris McDowell is doing with Into the Odd or Stockholm Cartel, this is like it is a step by step process that is massive, massive. So yeah, don't underestimate that. And at the same time, don't overestimate the guaranteed success of your project. Because I
Mhm.
see that happen a lot where people will be like, I want to make this thing. All right, cool. I'm glad that you can make that thing. How much are you spending on making this thing? Oh, like 5 grand. Okay. How much do you expect it to make? Oh, like $1 million. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I have lost more money on projects than I have made. As far as like the DMs Guild goes, like
Mhm.
there's plenty of projects that I have launched that did not hit. So
Yeah.
loss of cash is also a thing. So be prepped for that. Never take your foot out of the real world with a full-time job that is a big, big deal. So yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So, do you have any like yeah, or can you share a memorable moment or any kind of challenge that you face when you're creating your TTRPGs or supplements?
A memorable moment.
Or maybe a challenge, I don't know.
Yeah, I think like probably the thing I'm most well known for, at least in like heavier TTRPG circles. I think a lot of people know me now for the merchant because I got the Ginny D plug and everything like that.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
birds classes, yeah.
it was like my first thing I had really made that hit and hit hard.
Mhm.
Because like that was just like it was a thing in D&D that I think we all kind of were like, it would be cool if you could do this. And I think most people understood that like that was kind of a wanted thing in the game, but there wasn't anything to really support it. And so I built out my merchant really inspired by like Bravely Default or Octopath Traveler. Um and that one hit, but like I I don't know. It was like I think the thing that really stood out that I felt like, holy crap, I hit this, and like that was the best like feeling. Was whenever I released my Vanguard because there were a lot of people who would always just assume that like tanking, like the MOBA style tanking, where we're like an active, heavy crowd control, or like I want to be an obstructive support.
The
Mm. That was always kind of hard to do in a TTRPG because of turn-based combat. Uh, and for 5e at least, I was like trying to diagnose what this problem was. And so for me, it was the click of the thing is the problem why you can't tank is that everything that you want to take is happening off your turn. So the click for me was like, wait, but the ready action is there. So what if you can ready to do a thing off your turn and then suddenly it made tanking completely possible, you know?
Mhm.
And that click was one of those, like I remember I was out on my back porch, I'd take my dogs out to, like, go to the bathroom, and I was just like, "Ugh," and immediately, like, ran back in here and started typing it up, and it became the Vanguard, and yeah.
Mhm. So you got actually a lot of verbs and DM skill, like of course classes like a dancer and like rune keeper and the merchant, of course, that you mentioned, and also you have some like a like compendiums as well. So like which one you think that like the most you liked and the like the most successful in terms of like economically
Right. Yeah,
or you?
like, in terms of what has, like what I invested in versus what was the return on it,
Oh yeah.
like, I mean, of course, the merchant is probably, like, the biggest, like, financial success. But I also like the DMs Guild just randomly asked Jenny like what she would want to do a video on, and she picked that up, and I was like, Oh, okay, so that was lucky. That was, like, a lot of luck there. Um, and, so that one is, like, inarguably the big financial success. I guess just to put, like, a dollar amount on it so that people kinda knew what they were getting into before hopping into the hobby. Um,
Mhm.
the merchant I have spent about 2 grand on since I initially made it, and that's with, like, new artwork and just the time I put into it. Um, yeah, I think I probably spent around 80 to 100 hours working on that class.
Mhm.
Um, and the end goal or, like, the end of it, what I've made from it is around 20,000. So,
Mhm.
it's good, but it also comes with, like, a couple other thoughts, right? Like, number 1, could it have been bigger had I taken it off the DM's Guild? Well,
Mhm.
maybe, but then they wouldn't have promoted it with Jenny D.
Oh
So,
yeah.
I can't there's trade-offs to it. Um, I like the success of that one, for sure, I like the success of it. But I think the one that I'm happiest with, that I think, like, it kinda gets slept on, but Screen Rant shouted it out as, like, their 2nd favorite homebrew class, second to the I think it was the Illrigger last year, was my Alchemist.
Mm.
And that's the one that I'm like, I'm so happy I made it because I could maybe play it at one point.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that was a huge expansion of just thinking like, all right, here is I, I think I knew with like the merchant and the dancer, I was like, all right, I'm kind of like refining what my style is. And
Mm.
then I dropped the alchemist, and the alchemist was the like, oh, this is just I can just casually make a class like this now. Okay, cool. Like,
Mhm. Oh, so I actually also want to talk about not just like a D&D 5S 5e supplements, but also your unique systems with Vagabond. So, what inspired you to create this TTRPG system, and like, were there any existing games or genres that influenced your design?
yeah. So I at this point I haven't run D&D 5e for about 9 months. I played the one shot for Make a Wish 2 weeks ago, but that was I think a lot of the issues I had with D&D whenever I first set out to make Vagabond got exacerbated with this new edition, and playing it the other day kind of proved that point to me personally. Um where like a lot of the old strategies that people already knew were really good got even better. I mean, but that's yeah. So a lot of things that I think I think the problem for me was D&D 5e feels like a system that wants to account for everything that could happen,
Mm.
and as a result, it's like you get burdened down by a big bloated rule set. This is a reason why I also don't play Pathfinder, and I know people in the comments are probably going to fight me on that, but you know what? Pathfinder to
Yeah.
me is a bloated system. Um, so whenever I had ventured out and I was like, I personally, this isn't really going to do it for me. I don't really want to do Pathfinder. I started kind of branching out and looking more at like what was happening with the OSR,
Mm.
and that because Merkborg was like the big flash where I was like, oh, okay, so this is like an old school gaming. What makes this old school? Um, and then I had that was around like mid 2022. Um, And then around that time, like, I had started to hear about Shadow Dark, but hadn't really, like, checked it out quite yet. Um, but I picked up Basic Expert. I've got, yeah. So, like, I keep this over here by my like, on my bookshelf all the time.
Mhm.
Um, it once I had looked into that, it was like my brain had just exploded with like, "Oh, wait, you don't need 20 different rules to negotiate this one thing over here. That one thing can negotiate like all of this." So like kind of defragging a bit of my mind for like what
Mhm.
rules do you really need to play this kind of a game, and how
Mm.
might the game be enhanced by like can we simplify some of the operations?
Mhm.
Um one of the things I knew I never wanted to give up was group-based initiative. Um After playing Merkborg, it was just like I never wanted to go back to turn-based initiative ever again.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I was like, oh my God. Combat went from I was used to 5e combat taking 45 minutes to even 2 hours at times.
Yeah,
And in Merkborg, it was like we resolved that in 15 minutes. What the like if even. If even, you know.
it feels like more alive in that sense.
Yeah. And in a way, because you're opening up to group-based initiative, so you get rid of initiative, and what you're doing is like you're kind of opening up what is it? There's so many more pros to group-based initiative, like support seeing the immediate payoff of the thing they just did. That is I can't I will never go back to turn-based because that was so good. Like
Mhm.
cleric heals feel good because if somebody got punished for a thing they tried to do, that's instant payoff. Or a
Hmm.
buff that somebody activates, they see the direct impact of that within 30 seconds, not 5 minutes later, right? Everyone has an easier time remembering kind of what all was happening, so nobody's forgetting something like a bardic inspiration. It was so huge and eye-opening that I was like, I I still wanna run these games. I never wanna run a game like that again, though.
Yeah.
Um, so that turned into me dropping a lot of money to get all these other, like, OSR games to figure out, like, okay, so what's been happening in this scene? That's where I found Into the Odd, and Into the Odd was like if Merkborg was like my indoctrination, that was my ascension, where it was like, "Oh my god, this rule set is just so cake, and it can do anything you want to with it." Um, and Into the Odd was like, I you can get so much mileage out of a system that is this condensed, which is why we're
Mhm.
seeing, like, it was used for Mouse Ritter, right?
Yeah.
It inspired Merkborg. Uh,
Mhm.
there's another one I picked up the other day that I know uses Into the Odd called The Undying Sea.
Ah, nice. Yes.
So I'm gonna check that one out.
Mhm.
And then funnily enough, right around that same time, um, the Dragonbane Kickstarter, uh, not only funded, but started fulfilling.
Mhm.
And I had picked up the PDF and I was like really intrigued by what all was going on with it. Uh Binary resolution was the thing for me. I guess yeah, sorry for audience members. So binary resolution, it's like if I roll a die, I'm looking for a number that tells me yes or no, not like,
Mm.
well, you kind of succeeded, but like this is also no, I want to know from looking at my character sheet what I need to hit in order to know whether or not I passed or failed.
Yes.
And if this sounds really weird and unfamiliar, this is like how I would say a majority of systems still operate. And
Mhm.
it's actually 5e and Pathfinder that are kind of the anomalies here. Um, so, baked in DCs on your character sheet so you know what you needed to hit. I got into solo role playing around that time as well. So the thing for me was I wanted to make a system that was like it had all these other elements, but also was easier for GMs to run. That like
Hmm.
armed them with the tools to just create and like storytell rather than like I have to remember all these other rules for the players at the table to make sure that nobody does you're so much more of a adjudicator than you are a storyteller. And
Mm.
I wanted Vagabond to put you so much more further into the storyteller chair that
Mm.
I wanted the system to quote unquote run itself.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where I started looking at solo role playing games to be like, I need to make a system that could be run solo so that whenever a GM runs it, they don't have to adjudicate a million different things. Yeah, so that's where the ethos for the design for like everything's on your sheet. Monsters don't roll to hit. Everything is like just there on your sheet. Uh
Mm.
yeah, so Vagabond has kind of come out from all that. There's a bunch of other systems that have helped to pave the way. I mean, credits to like, Nave from Vin Milton, Neoclassical Geek Revival from Zarkov Kolowski. I'm sure I'm absolutely butchering that name. Uh, Shadow Dark, of course, but OSC by Gavin Norman. And yeah, there's so many of these games that were just like I looked at and I was like, there's so many smart elements from it, and how can I iterate on that to make it mine? You know.
Mm. Okay, so I would like to also ask about like Of course, I I get the main point, but can you describe the core mechanics of the Vagabonds? What sets them apart from like a traditional like D20 systems or other dice mechanics? And and also as another question, what was the most challenging part or mechanic to develop?
Ooh, okay. Um, so real quick, so Vagabond is using a brand new D20 like resolution mechanic. And this is what I'm just calling D20 like roll over. Something like a 5-year Pathfinder is what I would call roll high or shadow dark. And then there's like roll under, like Dragon Bane, or into the odd. So, with roll under, I guess just another for the audience. Roll under, rolling ones is good. That's like your crit because you're trying to roll underneath a certain score to pass your check. Whereas with roll high, you're just trying to roll the highest number possible to exceed a check that you don't really know. Like the difficulty is set by the world there, and your
Mhm.
character is like thrown up against the challenges like that. Vagabond combines the two into what I'm calling roll over. So the way that this works is you have a stat, and your stats range from seven, or sorry, wow, 2 to 7. And like, so if I have a logic of 7, my arcana skill, it would equal, or my arcana difficulty would be 20 minus 7. So that would end up with 13 is my difficulty I need to roll at or above to succeed. Now, if you're trained with that skill, it doubles your stat before you subtract it. So
Mhm.
20 minus 14 is 6. So I need to roll a 6 or above.
Mm.
So that's like basic check resolution. Um, the way that saves work and all this stuff, you don't get proficiency with a save. These are purely like reflexive or like kind of your other stats factor into those. So these are like 2 stats are going to add together to get the thing that you subtract from 20. And the reason we do it like this sounds complicated, but the reason it's done like this is we want to handle all the math before we make a roll because we never
Mhm.
add anything to a die roll after we start playing.
Mhm.
So we're not adding modifiers to any damage rolls, not adding any modifiers to any die rolls. It is what is on the sheet is what you need to hit. So yeah, I there's a lot of Vagabond that I tried to address some of the philosophy behind what I disagreed with on TTRPGs that some people might be like, well, why did you do this? And it's like, I there's a lot of it that I'm trying to address what I think is non-improvisational rolling.
Ah.
uh, roles that aren't telling you a yes and, right? Like there should always be an and at the end of that. Even if
Mhm.
it's like a no and, but there should always still be an and. Whereas I look at like success gradients sometimes in improv and I'm like, sometimes the success gradient is more of like a yes, but, and I'm like, I, I get that maybe that helps to craft the story, but that always feels harder to build off of. Um, because like, I like plenty of success gradient games, but it's just for me, I want, like, an action game to feel as much like, "Oomph, yes." It's like, not only do you hit the thing and you cut off its arm or whatever. So that's, like, the basics of it. It uses basic experts damage structure. So these are just, like the big difference there between that and 5e is basic expert doesn't add anything to a damage roll. So if something's like a claw is a D6, okay, well, you did 4 damage. Like,
Mm.
cool, you get it. The dice were supposed to tell you immediate results, not, there's this, and then I add this other thing over here. Because yeah, I tried to write the game for people who, might maybe feel a little bit of apprehension to play role-playing games because they're like, "This is a lot of math. I don't wanna do a lot of math."
Mhm.
So, this might be the game that gets the jocks into playing, you know? I do. I wanted it to feel punchy. I wanted it to feel exciting. And I really hope that once people kinda see it in play, they start to see, like, how quick things go with it.
Mm.
We're running I try to put a number to it because I don't like the word snappy. Snappy is so overused in the TTRPG industry. Um, we run through statistically, in 3 hours of play, we're running through 20 rooms of a dungeon. Like, we're speeding through it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So and the second question was, what was it like a most challenging mechanic or
Right.
thing to develop? And how did you overcome it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think just the basic core for how we wanted stats to work was kind of a big deal there. Um, and like figuring out there was a time where training was a gradient where it was like, okay, well, you're trained and you're a beginner at it. So now it's like your stat plus two. And then you subtract 20 or sorry, you subtract that number from 20 to get your difficulty with it. And
Mhm.
I tried this and there were so many other things that just kind of kept going with it where I was like, I think it's just time to pull that out and just simplify it with training.
Mm.
Um, so that's where that wound up. I think figuring out the mathematics behind that has been a challenge, but honestly, some of the bigger hurdles were things like encounter calculations. So difficulty, like challenge rating in D&D.
Mhm.
We have threat level for Vagabond, but the most challenging thing with this is that nobody has made a challenge rating system for OSR games. Like, there isn't a scale for determining the difficulty of a monster based off its stat block, other than some rough estimations. People say typically it's like, well, it has to do with hit dice, and I'm like, really? Because like I've seen plenty of instances where I see monsters that I'm just like that. I don't know. It doesn't compute. Um,
Mhm.
so I had to develop my own sort of system for determining the difficulty of a monster, and that process has resulted in me having to rewrite the stat blocks, the over 200 stat blocks in the game. I've had to rewrite them and recalculate difficulty 4 times in the process.
Mhm.
So it's huge. If I could delegate that to somebody else, I would. But yeah.
Mhm. So, I'm gonna ask you something about Vagabond because I was thinking about like you mentioned it being like the system was remaining like a setting agnostic or like a system agnostic as well. Some sort of it is a system, but like, can you elaborate on like how the system remains setting agnostic while still hinting at a world you're building? So I just couldn't catch that part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like, it seems to me that a lot of people, whenever they're like picking up D&D, they're not really playing in the Forgotten Realms. Um,
Mhm.
uh, I think they actually ran a poll on this, and like, what was it? Something like over 80% of games were homebrew settings.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
that's right.
it's pretty huge. Um, so what I kind of set out with was like, I want to make the tools kit more interesting than a campaign setting I'm trying to sell you. I've got ideas for like different things I could do for like I I have a like kind of a pulp fantasy kind of a vibe. I'm like I could build that world out. I have like I want to do Vagabond. I'm called the Spaghetti Grindhouse, where it's more of like I want to play in a Quentin Tarantino flick, like that, or Gonzo, where we're talking more about liminal fantasy or whatever. But the interesting thing to me is, and I'm so glad I have all these books I just used as an example the other day. In the system neutral, like, kind of sphere, there are a ton of campaign settings that are already made that are system neutral. So, probably my favorite one is The Vast in the Dark.
Last
Uh, th
door, yeah.
this is by Charles Ferguson Avery. This is a kinda large brutalist, mega structure, liminal, like, you sort of a dark, depressing sort of a setting, but it is so overwhelmingly captivating that as much as I love it, um, I was like, "That's so cool. I would love to play that with a different system," or like, it's like making recommendations of like other systems you can play with it. Um, and I was just like, I like this, but maybe I don't like the resolution mechanic from this game, or maybe I like this enough that I want to solo role play it, but nothing else supports that. Uh,
Mhm.
so I things like that. Gardens of Yin by Emmy Allen, which I have right here. This is another campaign setting and
Mhm.
system neutral. This is a really cool thing. I think a lot of people who maybe if they're coming from a only D&D perspective is I
Mm.
think that like if there's not a campaign setting with this TTRPG, then it doesn't really have a game. Whereas like that's just not really the case. Like Nate doesn't
Mhm.
have a default setting. You know, Shadow Dark kind of implies an idea that like there is a setting. Um, but like for the most part, a lot of stuff that's happening over there is like you're kind of leaning into it with the idea of you plug in your world and
Mhm.
choose the system that makes you telling that story fun.
Hmm.
So yeah.
So I remember that in your live streams, of course, there wasn't like a when in terms of character creation, what inspired the combination of like lineage, class, and past and future, and the character creation process? So what's behind of it?
Yeah. So there was a point where like and I guess you could say that this started out whenever I was like, well, we have to make something that has like the 5e vibe. Mm. And to me, I started looking at things in like D&D that just don't have a purpose. Uh,
Mhm.
why do you have a thing like a background? Oh, well, originally with 5e, background was a way that you were getting like 2 skills, some items, and starting gold, and a what we call a ribbon feature. So like
Mhm.
features that just don't really do much of anything. Um, this was meant to be an idea for improv and inspiration and how you were going to role play them, but they just didn't really carry enough weight. Um, or looking at something like alignment. Mm, Alignment, as far as I have gone back into it with like, you know, basic expert and started trying to research it throughout the editions, I'm just like, alignment is a constant hurdle that they introduced and they want to keep the
Mhm.
tradition in, but it has zero, like essentially like little to no mechanical weight.
Mm.
Same
Yeah,
thing with language.
absolutely right.
Languages in 5e are notoriously useless. Um,
Yeah, in a sense.
like there might be something that comes up in an adventure that it's like, well, can you read orcish or whatever? Um, then maybe that has a quote unquote payoff. But
Mhm.
if the payoff is just like, oh, okay, yeah, you know how to read this, and it tells you this right here, or the answer is no, I can't read that. I try to look at like how can we get rid of those lulls, null results, kind of.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, this started out so with character building in Vagabond, it is you have an ancestry, you have a class, you have your equipment, and your stats.
Mm.
I had fiddled around with like different ideas for like leveling through something called your future. So you were like, I'm gonna define my destiny. And so you pick like how you were gonna level up. Um, I thought this was like kind of interesting, but at the end of the day, it's like everyone just kept going back to we just want to do milestone.
Yeah.
I gave you like a set of rules for solo leveling for how you would like do, you know, something to XP. I have a questionnaire similar to what they do for like year zero engine games. But yeah, it's nowadays it's like I like the lighter load of character creation, but figuring out like how can we make a character in 5 minutes that can be expanded into 8 trillion different characters?
Definitely.
You know, not give you 8 trillion options to make like 1 or 2 characters that we all know. Most people are going to look up one of Treant Monk's guides and figure out how do I, you know, build this the best ever. That's
Mhm.
not a dig the Treant Monk at all. Like, you know, optimizing is its own thing, but that's how people engage with it now, you know.
Mhm, mhm. So also, you mean that they're like each lineage or heritage options or something like that will significantly alter the gameplay mechanics, right? Or are they like flavor driven things?
Oh, no, 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 they have mechanics. Yeah, they definitely have like mechanics that give them major boons. Like, and I wanted to set out to make, like, the ancestries their own, like they needed to have some their traits needed to have a couple different qualifications. Number 1, it's something that's shared by, like, everybody of that ancestry. 'Cause, like, I always thought it was really weird how, like, in D&D, there were cultural traits that came up, and,
Mm.
like, going out of the scope of any, like, "Oh, is that unethical to have this or whatever?" I'm like, "No, if I'm just looking at it, it's really weird to say that, like, all elves get training with, history." And I'm like, "What? Why? Where did that come from?" Um, so I tried to, like, pull away from stuff like that. That's all based off of, like, if you wanted to go into culture, you could just say you get a proficiency over here or whatever. But they're all the ancestors are getting strictly biological traits. This is why, like, dragons are getting their dragon breath, or they get the scaled armor. Um, Halflings are getting, like, squat so they can squeeze into spaces that other creatures can't. Um, Dwarves are harder to knock over, they're sturdier, things like that. Humans have
Mhm.
greater potential. I think we've kinda turned human into the jack of all trades of, like,
Yeah.
TTRPGs. So, yeah, that's kinda like I tried to get ancestries more towards the realm of these are biological things, and everything else that you would decide is gonna be like your perks. Perks are like where you're gonna get your cultural stuff or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, what are the mechanics for like characters to multi-class, or is the progression like strictly tied to one class in your system, or?
So multiclassing is not the default.
Hmm.
Um, if somebody like here's my thing. If I give somebody a tool set and I'm like, "You can't do this," within a week, somebody is gonna come up with a homebrew rule that says you can do this.
Yeah.
So, I don't really design telling people no, but
Mhm.
in Vagabond, by default, there is not a rule that says you can multi-class. The reason for that is because I wanted to define what everybody's playstyle was at
Mm.
first level. I
Oh,
I
well,
wanted I wanted to make sure that, like, the reason why a lot of characters don't feel like they really wake up in 5e until 3rd level is because their core options don't kick on for 3 levels. It's really
mhm.
um, I always thought that, like, Rogue, it is intrinsically, like, objectively a part of Rogue to have bonus action disengage for free.
Mhm.
That is part of their play style, and I also would not sacrifice them getting sneak attack.
Yeah.
Like, these are 2 aspects of them that I'm like, "This has to exist." So I tried to design all the classes in Vagabond where you wake up at first level. Like that is like I am a hero at first level, not third. Like I'm not growing up to maybe be a an adventurer. No, it kicks online at first level. If you want to do the like I grow up to be an adventurer, or whatever, we have 0 level options for that.
Hmm.
So um and if you decide to multiclass, the thing I would tell GMs out there is like with multiclassing, a lot of characters are going to get plenty of the multiclassing love out of just choosing certain perks to build their character. But if I was to like multiclass and like go wizard and then luminary and then
Uh-huh.
druid and then sorcerer, well, by that point, I would have like 16 spells and a 10th level wizard would have like 8.
Mhm.
So, I'm like, it's just not really the kind of thing that I'm personally trying to encourage, but
Mhm.
what I try to do instead is to give you so many class options that you don't want to multi-class.
Oh yeah, like you got the like gunslingers, right?
Yeah.
Like, are there any plans to integrate like firearms lore or cultural impacts into the gunslinger mechanics or something?
So, like, if people don't wanna have a gunslingers or they don't want guns in their fantasy,
Mhm.
that's everything that's written for the gunslinger is around ranged attacks,
Hmm.
not firearm attacks, right?
Oh, okay.
So if you wanted to, like, take that and be like, "No, I'm really good with a crossbow," like, you can do that and call it something that's not a gunslinger, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, Call it like an arbalist like they do in, Darkest Dungeon, you know? Um, if you wanted to go with that route. But, as far as, like, lore implications and all that stuff, I'm pretty certain just about every game now is embracing that people use guns in a lot of their fantasy. It's not
Mhm.
I don't think it should ever be the quote unquote expectation, but to just hand wave it like this is a whole realm of fantasy that doesn't exist is odd. I don't know. It's like it's the one thing I keep seeing people like, I don't have a problem if you want to play that like, magical girl inspired by Sailor Moon, but if you pull out a pistol, suddenly let's completely ignore the fact that ball bearings weren't invented until after the first pistol. So, whatever you want to say.
Mhm.
But yeah, like it's always an option. I try to make that really clear with Vagabond. Everything I'm presenting is an option. It's not the expectation.
Oh, yeah, yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So it just sparked my mind in the combat section. So you were talking about like group initiative interact. Like, how does group initiative interact with like a quick action restriction to maintain the balance in your system?
Oh, okay. So you just mentioned quick action.
Mhm.
What version of Vagabond do you have?
Well, like pretty early ones. That's it.
Okay, okay, okay. So this is fun. No, so like we originally Vagabond, like I was saying, it got started a lot in some 5e roots, but has completely diverted.
Oh.
Quick action was supposed to be like we still really want a bonus action of some kind. And now mostly that's gotten rid of because now it's moved into you can almost think of Vagabond as like a 2 action point system in a
Mm.
sense. So like you have your move and you have your action, but you can pick up certain perks that allow you to do things by skipping your
Mm.
move to do like a second action, right?
Fun.
So with things like so you were talking about grip. Um, grip and the way that all interacts now. Um, so you know how like in D&D they have like light or heavy weapons.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to get away from that as a weapon property. So that's handled now by your grip. So your grip is how we handle things like versatile. I hold it in 2 hands. It does an extra die of or a higher die of damage. Um, one hand, it's basically that's all you need to just code in is the grip is one hand. I don't need to say light. I don't need to say anything else. Two hand douche. Now it's like I get some of the heavy properties are like restricted to no, I've got to hold it in 2 hands. Like that's how I use this weapon.
Mhm.
And grip, by the way, comes from Dragonbane.
Uh-huh.
Um, Dragonbane doesn't go this kind of far into it, but I knew that people wanted the modularity of weapons that they would want with something like a 5e. So
Mhm.
I tried to kind of meet a middle ground where if people are familiar with Dragonbane and they're familiar with 5e, they'll look at Vagabond and be like, "Oh, okay, I get this. I get this." Yeah. But in terms of like balancing some of that stuff out. So, um, I think the most difficult thing with any of that is always going to be the dual wielding thing. This is why a lot of systems opt to just not do dual wielding.
Yeah, yeah, they just
It, that's one thing that immediately starts bloating out your action economy. Like
Mhm.
if you look at like Shadow Dark got rid of dual wielding. They were like, this is a headache. And nobody's really happy with how it plays out because a million different people are going to come up with how they think it should work and like can it, you know. Uh, so like with dual wielding in Vagabond, I still knew that people really wanted to do this thing. They really wanted to dual wield. And I was just trying to figure out how do we make this a thing for them without really busting stuff wide open. Dual wielding has been agonized over. And I still think to this day there may be some questions about how we might be able to reel it back even further. Um, but yeah, and dual wielding also causes other headaches with like the way that some spells are negotiated.
Oh, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
if I were to cast a spell on this weapon over here and you've got that in that hand, well, if I switch that hand over, now I've got it in the offhand, so that's now my bonus action one that I make, I guess. Or I choose all the time, I'm attacking with this one over here. And if this it's if it's not getting in the way of the game moving forward, I tend to think that it's typically okay. But
Mm.
the time that we start having pauses about like, how does this work is where I look at like, we need to file this down. We need to figure out like, we need to pinpoint this to where it works for all applications, not coming up
Mhm.
with fringe rulings to fix this one weird interaction we had over here. So, yeah.
Well, in terms of spell casting, I remember that like there was a spell customization system in some sort of, or am I right? Am I not? Okay, so can spell customization lead to powerful exploits, or and if so, let's say, how does the system maintain the balance in your system?
Yeah, so in some cases, it's just like some people will think that the fact that it's tracking a resource in and of itself is enough of a balancing measure. I don't really agree with that. Um, what I tried to do with Vagabond was calculate the, so leading it off for people that aren't familiar with it. Vagabond is not a Vancian magic system, so we're not using spell slots. It's not going off of the old like, okay, well, if you use cure wounds, everyone kind of agrees what that means. Basically, everyone has a definition for what that means in their respective system. Um, to me, Vancian magic just never really felt like magic. It was always really odd to me that, like, I know this one very specific thing I can do with this spell, and that never felt exciting to me. Um,
Hmm.
Spells were always an expensive key to answer very specific questions, and Vancian magic became more about, like, did I select the right thing to circumvent this issue instead of giving you a tool that maybe helps you to pick the lock, it doesn't pick the lock for you, right?
Hmm.
So the casting system in Vagabond is like you are determining your damage. All spells have an effect with it. So like if I cast something, it does something. Um, and what you can do is you can change the size of it. So like we call this the delivery. So if I want it to affect like a sphere, if I make a ball of fire, I'm like, okay, well, is that ball of fire like I lob it at somebody and then that's remote. So I'm like throwing a ball of fire. Do I want a wall of fire that these guys can't get through? So then that's a line of fire, and then I focus on that, which is like concentration.
That
Uh,
really makes sense, but I think I would like so sorry to interrupt you, but like you're fine. Will there be any kind of like a rebuild spells for newer players? Because they may feel overwhelmed by this customization. Like I can do that, you can do that because that's one. But what about newer players?
Yeah, so as far as like newer players go, if you just cast this thing at like a base level, like 1d6 damage and all that stuff, you're so
Mhm.
good. You're doing like around the same damage as somebody that's like going in and like swiping a sword at it or whatever, right? I wanted to make sure that if you ran out of spell slots, you still had stuff to do that was still magic, right?
Hmm.
So this is like the cantrip thing with 5e. So you have cantrips because a wizard wants to keep casting spells, and wizards that suddenly go like, "Well, now I guess I have to use a dagger," feels not great, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, I wanted to give you the option of like, these are things that you can do that are potentially cantrip or I guess essentially cantrip level that build out into something bigger.
Mm,
Um, and a part of this is reeling in how much mana you can spend to change a spell up like this,
mhm.
right? It's more than just a balancing measure, it's an accessibility measure.
Oh,
So if someone goes like, I have to spend 7 mana to customize a spell, so, like, if I pick this delivery over here and I want it to last this long, and suddenly, like, the Sherlock math equations start coming up over
mhm.
my face, um, it becomes overwhelming. Um, Whereas I think that, like, if you tell somebody, like, "Hey, if you just wanna cast this to deal damage, it's still good to do that," or the
Mm.
effect or whatever, but if you wanna increase that and get a little bit more, like, oomph with it, you can spend this other thing called mana to, like, increase that size or whatever. And a part of this would be also be in just how we present the information. So, this is why I hired on Guillaume Bonnet to do, technical diagrams and illustrations throughout the book.
Mm.
So, now we have our spell deliveries have a incredible illustration, from
Mm.
Guillaume. Um, Sometimes even just that, a representation of how it looks connects so hard with your visual learners that, like, I was a teacher, so I studied differentiation methods in, college. But, yeah, just having something like that
Mm.
where somebody who the text didn't click with will see it on a map and go, "Oh, got it." I know what that means now. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's how can we break down accessibility barriers? That's been a big deal for Vagabond throughout this process.
Mm-hmm.
And just finding out like what is the best way for us to convey this information as cleanly as possible to deliver as much punch with that information as possible.
Mm. So, what about non-mana users? I mean, how do non-mana users interact with or resist spell casting in your system for oral audience?
Yeah. So, I guess it all depends on what the target of that is, right? So if the way it works out in Vagabond is like if they're unwilling, like it's an enemy, then you have to make a cast check. So that cast check works similarly as all the other stuff does. You'll probably see like I think some people get a little bit worried because they think about like it should be harder to target a beholder than it is to target a goblin with a spell. So enemies have certain abilities that cause penalties to certain rolls. And these are usually always dice rolls because it more rolling more dice feels like more fun. Even if it's a penalty, it's like, oh, well, I still got the like, oh, it was a 2, like that still feels fun. Um,
Mm.
so there are certain abilities that do that, but in terms of like monsters making saving throws, monsters don't roll any d20s.
Mm.
Like NPCs, monsters don't roll anything. All the dice rolls are handled by the characters. So, yeah, my central ethos there was unless the heroes step in, the villain should succeed. Like
Mm.
that's point for point for point. The thing that is not interesting or compelling about a story is like, was this summoner able to keep the portal open because they kept passing these checks? That's not if the portal collapsed before the heroes even got to the summoner, then
Mhm.
like there's nothing interesting about that story. Whereas like if that evildoer is going to succeed unless the heroes step in, well, then like we don't have to worry about whether or not they're making these saves or whatever. Like it's the players are the ones that are actually feeling like heroes who are going to have more of an impact on the story.
Mhm.
So that's been a lot of like negotiating where or like how do we need to write adventures to make sure that like heroes are kind of kept at the forefront. A lot of stuff is like they kind of already have subconsciously done this with a lot of TTRPG writing, but I'm trying to emphasize that even further with Vagabond, where I'm like, guys, GMs out there, I'm sorry if you think this, but you're not really quote unquote playing the game by rolling a saving throw for a monster, right?
That's right.
That kind of subconsciously puts everybody at the adversarial chair, I kind of think. Where like I rolled a 20, but I'm the GM. So I don't really feel as much excitement about that as if I had been a player, you know?
That's right.
So I try to remove stuff like that. Not make the GM feel like the bad guy is a big deal for
Mhm.
me. If the system is telling you right up front, look, unless you do something about it, the monster's gonna hit you. Like, yeah, point blank, so
That makes so sense. I definitely understand.
but yeah,
You also got a
yeah.
sorry, brother. Yeah.
No, 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 you're fine, you're fine.
You also got like a morale system. So right, and like how does the morale system interact with enemies? Like, can it lead to surrender, retreat, or negotiation, or am I just getting it wrong? So,
You got it. So Morel's been around for a while. I think since second edition, if I'm
we're
remembering right.
oh,
But but in more contemporary systems, they got rid of it, and I don't know why. Um,
mhm.
so what the morale is doing is like under certain conditions, enemies are going to make a check. And this check is by rolling 2d6. So we got a bell curve going on here. Now, if that morale check, if the roll of this is higher than the morale score, they're gonna either like it should just be assigned to you as the GM. They're probably gonna retreat or surrender.
Hmm.
And a part of this is you as the GM are getting the fun of like, I get to like remove some of the micromanaging of the role play, and
Mhm.
that's just handled by the stat block. So like if they're gonna retreat here, okay, cool. Then like they're gonna run this turn. And like that's fine. It's like what? It's like 5 goblins that run away. Okay, cool. And now what that means is that the players suddenly you're giving them a choice of like, well, they're running away from you. What do you want to do? Are they going to get bloodthirsty and like go hunt them down? Because like
Mhm.
that could be a strategic choice. We don't want them to alert the 30 other goblins in here, so let's take these guys out.
Oh,
Or
definitely.
yeah, or did they maybe like parlay with them and say like, "Look, you get away with your lives, but you don't go back and alert your buddies. I want you to run and you get out of this dungeon right now," or something like that. Um, but also this helps out like a bit more with solo role play,
Mhm.
because as you're running the game, it feels weird that like you're just assuming every monster fights to the death. So this is we're kind of giving them a little bit of an AI right here to say, "Hey, an interesting situation might happen that might not result in this combat always going to death, you know?"
That
So
definitely makes sense and perfect part of the play. So, and also, I would like to ask about like for Vagabond, of course. Do you have any kind of plan for expansion to explore other genres outside of okay, classic fantasy or I don't know, weird west like sci-fi or cyberpunk?
yeah, so I do have plans. I've already got, like, a world I've kind of had in mind for a second, um, that I know this is gonna be like, "Oh, another one of these." Um, but it's, so post-apocalyptic nuclear, I mean, very Fallout-esque,
Hmm.
but I'm trying to take it away from the idea that, um, this is so it's gonna be called Broken Arrow.
Uh-huh.
Um, Broken Arrow is, Broken Arrow is like the US nuclear code for, we've lost a nuclear warhead. If we ever, like if we ever just suddenly can't find one here in the US, one of them goes missing, we call it a broken arrow. And, I the thought was, like, what if not necessarily, like, what if we hit nuclear war, but what if actually it was, like, something else caused the world to collapse, and then civilization eventually rebuilt up and everything, and in the future, they discover that, like, all the weapons and stuff that have been, like, kind of retained or, like, "lost to time," quote, unquote. And Broken Arrow would just literally be the entire world's arsenal has been lost as a and so it's almost, I think Fallout 76 tried to do something like this, where it was like you're kind of raging territory wars on each other, trying to find these, old undetonated, like, nuclear,
Mhm.
you know? So, I thought that that was cool, and it kinda, like, breaks away from the whole, like, mutated wasteland into something that might lean in a bit more into, like, maybe solar punk, maybe, something like that. Um, yeah, like, I think that the post-apocalyptic total nuclear fallout has mostly been explored, but I'd like to do something maybe kind of a bit more in the realm of, like, maybe Adventure Time, um,
Mm.
you know? So I've thought about that, and, of course, at some point, I have to write a liminal, like, fantasy setting that is, like, I want to do that. It is like the most, I think, evocative genre that's emerged in fantasy in the last like 10 years. Everybody's doing it, so I'm like, I'm gonna throw in my hat in the rink at some point.
Mhm.
Um, one of the other thing I've got two other projects for settings that
Mm.
I want to get down. One of them is not for Vagabond.
Mhm.
But the other one is, of course, the Spaghetti Grindhouse is old, exploitation films and, like, just that ridiculous over the top action with a little bit of, like, wuxia flavor and Western, like I said, imagine Pulp Fiction, uh,
That sounds fun.
yeah, Kill Bill, mm,
Mhm.
yeah, kinda taking it in that realm of or like, Eat the Right. I don't know, have you checked that one out yet?
Oh, yeah, yeah, granola, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. That's perfect. I really like it, but and I read the expansion as well.
Yeah. It's a, I like that with Eat the Reich, they were like, "This is a dumb, hyper violent game. So, like,
Mhm.
go in there and do the thing and just be dumb vampires killing Nazis. Like,
Mhm.
go for it."
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm all here for it. That's like
Do some setting specific, but perfect.
yeah, it is, but it's
Goats and Malgoats, have you ever played that? There are also Visigoths and Malgoats or something like that. They're really I'm gonna okay. I'm gonna write it down if I wrote it correctly. I'm not sure, but that's really That's really nice game as well. Do check it. You're gonna really like it.
I had not heard of this one, so yeah, I'm gonna look into that one.
Hmm. I'm not sure about the like. Oh yeah, Lucian Khan is the designer, and the Hit Point Press is the publisher.
Oh, Malgoth. Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay.
This really, of course, again, another system specific game, but it's really so fun, and also, yeah, like it's kind of like a LGBTQI dating sim, of course, but still, it's really perfect game.
Yeah, it's like a Brindlewood Bay where you're just playing, what is it, like Golden Girls fighting or investigating mysteries. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
in shopping mall.
yeah, it's great. It's great. I love that. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of RPGs that are carving out that like we had this idea for like we want to tell this kind of story, but we don't really want to write that specific story. We think that the genre is so interesting.
Uh huh.
We want to make a whole game around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
So I'm gonna ask you another question about the Vagabond, and that's the last question I ask about Vagabond, and I will ask some two, three more questions after that. But okay, will the Vagabond include kind of a tools, or does it include right now, for online play, such as like I don't know, virtual tabletop integration or VTT files or something for roll manual foundry? Will it include, or that's that right now? I don't know, cause that's why I'm asking.
So, Land of the Blind is a partner with Alchemy VCT. And we've already started the talks with Foundry to get Vagabond module over there as well. So we're in the works on that. I have three other partnerships that I have tried to get in discussions with. We're working on all that. Some of the talks have started, but I basically it's like I wanted Vagabond to launch with the physical print that also has a character creator.
Oh,
The Yeah, the PDF already kinda has that integration where, like, if you put in your stats, you'll see that it just auto calculates everything really quick.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I am looking at, um well, yeah, I guess I'll just say it. I'm trying to talk with Demiplane right now about getting
mm,
Vagabond over there. A lot of this stuff comes down to they're very busy.
oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, so, like, if it's not happening instantly, it will happen soon. Um, but yeah, so Alchemy VCT, we've already contract inked on the paper is already dry. With Foundry, we're still working on finalizing things before getting it over to our developer. And so
Mm,
that's the plan is that everything will have VTT. As far as Roll20 goes, I'm already because I've done so much work with the DMs Guild, I already know people at Roll20. I want to talk to them
mhm.
about getting it on there, but it's always beholden to what they have time to do.
So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay, so one of my last questions. So, okay, so how do you create your TTRPGs? What is your secret sauce that you are using while making your the perfect receipt? How do you create your TTRPG games? Like an for like, do you set your target audience before you creating it, or do you set afterwards, or any kind of thing like that?
So, it was funny because I kinda had this talk the other day over on Roll for Combat's channel. And I really agree with what Jordan was saying about
Mm,
indie RPGs. That typically they seem to come from a singular vision, either by an individual or a collective that has decided like this is the thing that we want to do. This is like why so like I'm one guy doing the thing that I wanted to do that I had set out to do. And a lot of people latched onto the idea of it because I think I sold the idea very, very well. Um, and I look at a game like Triangle Agency. Have you checked that one out?
no, no.
Triangle Agency is so like so it's by Haunted Table Games. And they made a game that was like SCP Foundation meets X-Files meets like kind of 60s psychedelia in a way.
Hmm.
Like I don't want to say Austin Powers, but like that kind of like aesthetic, you know? So, Triangle Agency is a very cool game, brand new system core. Um, I like a lot of what they had going for it, but the thing to really, I guess, emphasize there is like that was the vision of two dudes who decided like this is a thing that we would like to do.
Hmm.
Now, the thing is, the thing that makes somebody, I think, a pioneer or an innovator versus an emulator
Yeah.
is if you're just kind of like walking the same beaten path that other people have and not really bringing anything new to the table, I think that would, probably put you more in that camp of like, I am making a game for the people who already want this thing over here.
Oh yeah.
And then innovators are the people who are like, I don't know that anybody would want this, but I want this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess I'm like a little bit of both because like I knew that I really liked the like high action fantasy games.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't happy with what was being offered at the time, right? Um, and I still think that there's plenty of things that I see with other systems that I'm like, I really like what this is doing, but it's not my forever game. I really like what this is doing over here. It's probably not my forever game. Um, but yeah, I think Vagabond was one that I set out that I was like, this is my vision I have for it. And once I was telling people about that vision, a lot more people got behind it. Uh, yeah, and then I mean, I also have like my audience that was like, "Hey, we just like the stuff you do. We want to support you."
Yes.
So there might be people that like have backed it that will never play Vagabond, but they like my YouTube content, you know. But yeah,
Mm-hmm. So
like yeah. Oh, that if that answered the question, I was like,
yeah, that was an answer, but I really want to try to like extract your secret sauce, or I'm trying to find the thing that can help the people that are watching these to create their own TTRPGs. So like, what they should do when they are trying to create something new, or what are you doing when you are thinking about like a system, or what makes you feel that that gives you the click.
so one of the most okay, the best advice I can give anybody that is
Mhm.
looking at taking on a task like this is to, and this is going to sound so dumb and so like after school program, like so whatever, is to just do it. You would be
Yeah.
you would be incredibly surprised how many people are like, I want to be a game designer. I want to do this. Cool. 3 years goes by that they had that into that the, Google Drive, document first open and nothing got done on it. Like,
Mm.
this is a problem with, like, literally every field. There's plenty of like, my background is in jazz studies. There are plenty of musicians that I know that had all these grand ideas about different projects they wanted to do. A transcription project, I wanna put together this big band piece or whatever, and they talk a lot about it and they don't actually do it. Um,
Mhm.
to the creators that are out there that are like, "I wanna be a game designer," um, stop talking about doing it and do it, like, this is, I don't think there's enough, like, dad kick you in the ass advice, out there really that's just kinda putting it this bluntly, but it's like, to the people that are out there that are like, I'm aspiring, that's great, I'm not gonna I don't like coddling my audience. If you're not going to do it, stop saying you're gonna do it, because in 6 years, you're gonna feel like an ass because people are gonna be asking why you never did that thing, you know? So, like, and it's just find the drive, find the ambition. Those are hard things to do. I 100% get it, but, like,
Mhm.
if you wanted to do it, you'll actually do it.
Mm.
Yeah, that's, like, the reason why a lot of projects require a project manager is to keep people actually doing the thing. So much of
Uh,
management, like, so much of being a manager is just making sure that somebody is still doing the thing they said they were going to do. So, yeah.
that is party. So there isn't any like bad game designer or a good game designer. There are people that can't do or not willing to do. So that's
Yeah, like, there's so much of it that it's like there is a process to it. There's resources to help you figure out what that process is like.
Mhm.
Um, and like for me, if I was saying like I'm gonna publish this game, I'm gonna get it out there, well, then I'm gonna do the things that it takes for me to do that.
Mm.
Like if I find out, well, shipping to like I don't know, I tried to look up a package to like Barcelona,
Mhm.
earlier on this year. It was like $400. So then I was like, oh, I've got to really figure out shipping because this looks super expensive. What the hell? So
Mm.
I learned new things along the way. But if nobody else is going to help me out with logistics, I've got to do it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Mhm. So do read your books and try to create something new, something unique, and just focus on creating.
Yeah.
That's our message right now. Okay.
Just do that. Do.
Just so like I also want to ask that where do you see the future of like let's say Vagabond, but any of your process or creative process or any of your TTRPG systems in the next like 5 or 10 years?
Oh God, where do I see it?
Oh yeah.
Ooh, that's a tricky one because to me right now, the one thing I'm focused on is getting it out. Um, what I would love to do is to option it out to a publisher so that it will continue to get print runs.
Mm.
Because as a solo creator, I have the money to do a print run, right? Now, that print run gets me a lineup of books, and I already know that like I'm going to eat the cost of probably about 50 of those books just to get it sent to like I want to get it sent to Free League. I want to get it
Mhm.
sent to like Goodman Games. I want to get it sent to like Exalted Funeral, and I also want to get it in the hands of a bunch of other YouTubers.
Yeah.
So I have to eat that cost to invest in my future, which is hopefully getting this into a standard print run,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So like that's a big deal. I know
So
for
POG
me,
is not a solution, right?
what was that?
Print on demand is not a solution.
It could be, but
Oh.
the problem with prints on demand is like, okay, so Vagabond has custom end papers. Print
Mhm.
production, whenever you do prints on demand, is rough. Um, so looking at Merkborg, this is one that they actually, I think they got it printed in Lithuania. But
Mm.
anywho, so they have custom end papers. So whenever I open the book, these end papers there's information here. Like immediately I get into it. However, if I go with a print on demand service, that's not always the case. So we call this duplex printing. Um,
Mhm.
and you really have to go with a publisher who's set up to do that. Because if I go print on demand and I do this, like, say, drive through RPG, if I go and I pick up a drive through RPG book, this is always going to be blank.
Oh.
I open this up, blank, right? I open up the back, blank. This
Mhm.
is this is wasted space to me, you know.
Mhm. Makes
That that's not on this creator. That's on Lightning Source and drive through RPG. So
Mhm.
I can still include that information elsewhere in the book, but to me, this version of the game, I would like to have it at least if this is going to be the game that I want to like look at on my shelf in 20 years and be like, man, I did that, didn't I? Like I want it to look good, you know.
Mm.
Um so things like that, if in the future it just wound up like let's just say everything goes just absolute tits up and like I I can't afford another print run. Eventually I'd probably do a print on demand style thing, but I'm crafting a product here with this first book, and I want to make sure that that product is it,
Appealing.
it's just awesome.
Oh. Mm.
And it makes people want to pick it up. Especially like, like let's say I get it to Free League. Then they pick up the book and they go like, "Oh, so that's what we would need to produce this book?" We actually want to put up like 10 grand to do the next print run and, do whatever like that. Like that's usually the way that it works.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, you'll option something out to a publisher. That publisher will say like, well, you're going to get this much of a percentage of all the sales. and we keep this, but you don't have to worry about handling your distribution, your retail. Like I myself couldn't get a book into Barnes and Noble, but
Really,
I know a distributor can.
really, like yeah, definitely. The distributors gotta help in the situation, hopefully. So the other question is, would you be interested in licensing your system for third-party creators to make compatible content? So that's something really important for me to ask because lots of like, let's say indie creators, quote unquote, doesn't really like take care of the third party creators in some sense, or maybe because of the monetary issues. I don't know, but like there aren't many third party creators in most of the systems that are published. So
Yeah.
would you be interested in licensing it?
Yeah, so to me, number one, as far as anything goes with Vagabond, if people want to make stuff with Vagabond and all that stuff, you keep 100% of the royalties. Like I'm not like, yeah, I am very Vagabond will basically be a release of responsibility license. So what that means is all you got to include is like it's not an official thing from me. Like, hey, I didn't make it. I'm not responsible for the thing you made. Um, and like that's it. Like it's the same thing that I think they do with Merkborg and Shadow Dark.
Mm-hmm.
So all you got to say is like, hey, I made the logo. It says like runs on Vagabond. Um,
Perfect.
and that is a thing where I'm just like, you put that somewhere, or not, whatever. But my only ask is like, I know I can't stop things. This, I guess, to some people that might not really know kind of why this was kind of a deal that got brought up here lately. Wizards of the Coast lost a lawsuit because they tried to sue a company that was trying to be like this new TSR thing that was
Mm.
publishing a bunch of like neo-Nazi crap underneath their like brand. Yeah, but they let off the lawsuit by trying to argue that because it was hateful content, it was damaging to Wizards of the Coast.
Makes sense.
And if I remember right, the lawsuit got dismissed because it was like you can't really enforce this because that's a subjective thing. I mean, according to the lawsuit getting dismissed from what I recall, the reason why it got dismissed was because they were arguing subjectively about how the license was being used, not that these guys actually like violated the terms of the license or something like that. So I know that like I could put in my books like, hey, Nazis can't make anything with my books. But I can't enforce that. I can't do
Mhm.
anything about that. Like, so, despite the people that want to go and tag Wizards of the Coast on social media about like, hey, why don't you guys do something about this? And
Mhm.
often I gotta tell those people that say that they can't. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so like that's why a lot of people are opting for the release of responsibility. Where I'm
Mhm.
like, the thing that helps me is people making content for Vagabond. Like,
Mm.
that's awesome. Somebody can come
Sure.
along and find something and be like, "What is this game?" Like, whatever. So, it's free advertising for me, and if people wanna make the content using the engine that I made, thank you, uh,
Mhm.
and, feel free to do it. I don't want any of your royalty money. I mean, I want money, but I don't wanna take anything from you. You are a creator who has supported me through virtue of making stuff in the ecosystem I'm trying to build here. So it's if you go and you sell it on Drive Through RPG, that's all you. You do you. You keep the royalties, and I'm just happy to know that people like the thing and then they're able to. If I was able to make people money,
Good.
because they make stuff for the thing that I made, that's sick. Like that's
But of course, if you do like $1 million, don't forget to help the vagabond with Taron ponds.
but that's the thing. Those people's success is advertising for me, you
Of
know?
course,
Like,
you can play without the core rules, right?
well, yeah, there's that, but there's also like that release right there. doesn't mean that like someone can just literally reprint Vagabond.
Sure.
That's just so there's this got tested a little bit earlier this year with basic fantasy role play. There was a guy who just decided to like carbon copy Chris Gonnerman's game and try to release it as his own through like Amazon fulfillment and everything. And yeah, it's so Chris Gonnerman put a lot of basic fantasy role play in the Creative Commons and the public domain, and this guy wasn't using it right. But at that same time, Chris Gonnerman didn't really have a whole lot that he could do that was actionable against it. So there's a time where, as much as we're like pro open source and everything, that can hurt you and your community, you know? So you kind of got to watch out for it. But yeah.
So I really would you like to add anything, by the way, about your system or your creative process, or you even about your YouTube channel or anything?
I mean, you asked like basically all the questions I would have kind of gone into with it. If there's anything that I guess I could clear up or whatever, I'm happy to answer. But yeah, man.
So I'm doing my job well.
Totally. It's yeah, we
So
covered
I really
everything.
thank you joining this session with us at Tavern Talks, because I really want people to know about well, like what TTRPG creators are trying to do, trying to create, and like they're trying to survive, of course, before everything else. So I want people to help and support each other, because without support, we are nothing but just one bunch of lunatics that trying to create their stories and trying to create their like a imagine like a virtual taverns and virtual kingdoms with no meaning behind of it. So that's why we need your support to feel that we are not crazy in any sense. And I'm gonna put your links, and please send me your links.
Oh,
And on the comments, of course, not many people are going to watch these because I'm just started, but hopefully you can share this video as well. So and then maybe if he and I'm gonna try to add the other links as well, the other creators projects that we are talking about, because like they also need money, guys, and you got some bucks and quits that I know that you're hiding in your pockets and your under your pillows. So please help them, help us, help us to each other. So thank you to be here. Thank you to helping me out and for your precious time. Thank you and thank you.
hey, thank you for the great questions, man. Yeah, this is awesome.
And that was really nice talk. Okay then. So see you folks for the next video. Hopefully, of course, if I'm not gonna die. See you.